Good evening. We have a full house tonight. Welcome to our regular or voting meeting of April 29th, 2019. We've got a relatively short agenda, but we've got a lot of participants this evening, so welcome. Thank you for coming. Mrs. Bonifield, would you go ahead and take the roll, please?
I would love to. Mrs. Bradford?
Here.
Mrs. Burton?
Here.
Mr. Centers?
Here.
Mrs. Frank?
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Here.
Mrs. Bonifield is present. President Johnson?
Here. We have a quorum. Thank you. Mrs. Burton, would you lead us in the pledge this evening?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, welcome to those in the audience and everyone watching at home. And if you're in the audience and you want to follow along with our agenda, you can step outside the door, and to the right we have a table. You can follow along. We also have the blue slips. I do have a few of them tonight. You can fill out our blue slips. For those of you at home who would like to follow along, you can tune into our website, livoniapublicschools.org, highlight over the board tab, and you'll see agendas, and you can follow along. As I said, we don't have a real long agenda tonight, but we have a couple of really special items. One of the things that I've been accustomed to do as president of the board is I like to read our district climate goal. And that says all students will experience a positive, safe, and welcoming environment where both students and adults respect and value one another. The best way that we can show you and lead you and set an example is the way we conduct ourselves here at the board table. We respect each other. We may not always agree with one another, but we do it respectfully, we listen, and we come to a consensus. This occurs with our cabinet members as well. We don't always agree with them, but we have respect for them and they respect us. And that's the best example that we can set for our community and for our students. So anyone who comes to the podium tonight, the board gives you our full respect. We ask that you respect us in return and set the good example. So we'll get going tonight with our item 3, which is our communications, and item A is our points of pride. Mrs. Jenkins, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, President Johnson, members of the board, Superintendent Oquist. Tonight we continue our Points of Pride series by highlighting 2 special programs that have been in place for many years at the elementary and middle school levels. The first is ACAT, which is our alternative classrooms for the academically talented. We will hear from ACAT coordinator David Zazinski, who has brought along a few helpers to talk about this very special program, which is housed at Webster Elementary. The second portion of the presentation will feature our middle school alternative classrooms for the academically talented, also known as MACAT. This program is coordinated by Doug Coates and is housed at Frost Middle School. Mr. Coates has also enlisted the help of some students who will share their thoughts on this amazing program at the middle school level. And with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Zazinski to join me to kick off tonight's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. It's nice to be here this evening to speak about our program. We have a lot of pride in our program, and as Ms. Jenkins said, we enlisted the help of some of our students who imagine you like to hear from our students maybe sometimes more than the adults, so they're going to each share in the presentation with me, so I'm going to get started though. Just a real basic fact about our program is our grade level configuration. We have multi-age classrooms, and then you can see the configuration up there. We call them our family groups. So one benefit of our multi-age configuration, an example of that would be, for some students, a transition can be hard, learning a new policies of new teacher or new classmates. So a first grader that moves up to second grade, they're moving up with roughly half of their classmates are the same. And of course, the goal is to keep the same teacher. So that's one example of where a multi-age pays some dividends in terms of being productive. So And some of the things we value, you can see up there, think clearly, care deeply, act wisely. So that's an end goal for all of our students leaving us. We hope they can do those things. I think they're important. A safe and nurturing environment, we think, is vital. Meeting the academic, social, emotional needs of our population is something we're pretty focused on because many of our students have some different needs in that area. We really value enriching experiences. We want to give our population unique experiences, special experiences that stimulate their intellect. We value collaboration, exploration, and problem solving, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that coming up. And the ability to reflect. Going back and examining one's decisions we feel is pretty important for growth. So those are a few things we hope you would see if you come visit our school in action. So I'm going to invite, why don't I invite all three of our helpers up. They're going to introduce themselves and each take a slide here. So voila, introduce yourself first.
All right. Hello, I'm Shayna,
Evening.
and I have been at Webster since 3rd grade. I'm now in 6th grade and have seen collaboration and problem solving woven into many activities at Webster. The images shown in the slide depict different team problem solving activities. The first image shows a science class activity where students were put into groups and had to create a bridge. It had to hold as much weight as possible without it collapsing, and we learned lots about not only science, but about learning to compromise and include the ideas of your classmates. In the second picture, it shows an activity from the beginning of the year. In this activity, students tried to put a gummy worm through a lifesaver without touching it. Students had to work in their group to solve this problem using things like paper clips to assist in accomplishing the task. In addition to these activities, students also participate in some math-related problem-solving activities throughout the year, often in groups, focusing on the steps of problem solving. With our groups, we work together to solve the problem by going through all the problem-solving steps. Webster focuses not only on teaching students how to use problem solving to achieve their goals, but also how to work together in order to do so. Many students, myself included, find these activities and lessons to be enjoyable and beneficial. These collaboration and problem solving activities are a crucial part of the curriculum at Webster.
Great, thank
you.
Thank you, Shayna. So moving along, one thing we like to do is we try to plan culminating activities. This is an example of a culminating activity for a science unit that related to forces in motion. So this year, this was new. This is the first time we did this. When we were planning our culminating activity, we wanted to do something high interest, fun, interesting, yet challenging. So we had the students create their own Rube Goldberg machine. So if you're unfamiliar with a Rube Goldberg machine, it's going to be difficult for me to explain. You'll see. I have a video, a couple quick. No, we lost our mouse. Oh, there's the mouse. Sorry, I need my glasses here. So here we go. You guys over there, can you see the little? Oh, there we go. So, this is a tough one for me. Seeing over there, did I get it? The X. There we go. Okay. So they just had they had at least, I believe, 3 different transitions to apply the force, and then a goal of something happening in the end. So obviously that one dumps some dominoes into a cup. All right. So we have one more here. This one's a little more spectacular, maybe. Loud boom, at least.
Okay, hold on. All right, go ahead and go.
Oh.
Hold on.
I was one of the cheerers at the end of that one. So, I just can't see to make this big again. Is it over here? Oops. Oh, boy. Wow, I blew it. Things were going so well.
Stacy will take care of you.
The best laid plans.
So I can speak a little bit more about that as, sorry, Ms. Jenkins, I really blew it. So as you can see, the culminating event, it was fun, the kids enjoyed it, related to the science unit, so we try to do that kind of stuff just to sort of make a celebration at the end of some study, area of study. And actually, subconsciously I knew I was going to do something like this, and I brought a paper copy, so we'll continue on. So, another thing we do, a special event. I believe we're approaching our third annual. We call it our STEAM night. So science, technology, engineering, art, math, maybe STEAM. You accent the M because we also added music on there. We have a concert, a music concert. Thank you, Stacy. There we go. It is. Thank you. Yeah. I will, as long as I don't have to do any long distance clicking of X's, I'll be good. So this is, as you can see from our photos here, we bring in, kids can play games. We have large chessboards. The far right, you see a bunch of old appliances taking apart electronics, trying to see how it works, put it back together. The far left picture, we have our classrooms create, since we like to focus on problem solving. High cognitive demand type problems, multiple step, takes a while to move through them. So we have, for this night, we have the classes create their own problems that parents and other community members can come in and solve those problems. It just lets our community see the types of things we're having students do and put a fun spin on it to have them try to solve the problems as well. All right, I'm going to invite Ethan up now. He's going to tell you a few words.
Hello, my name is Ethan. I'm a 6th grader at Webster. I've been at Webster since 4th grade. So I've experienced, I think, 3 science fairs now. And so every year, Webster has a science fair. You could be in one of 2 parts of the science fair, and one is judged and one is not judged. I think this is really cool because, like, if you don't do good under pressure, then you can do the non-judged, but if you like pressure, you can do the judge. And yeah, obviously. And this lets the student choose how they learn. And I think the science fair is really cool also because it makes a way for learning to be fun, and the end product is really cool as well.
Thank you.
So hi, my name is Emma. I've been at Webster since 3rd grade. So over there are 2 pictures of our Act 18 program and ACAT program. Some of the interactions include buddies and service squad. I participate in both. My service squad job is to eat lunch with the younger kids with special needs, and then I play with them at recess. In the afternoon at the end of the day, I also help clean up the same classroom, the board, and the tables. Buddies is when each class partners up with another in the opposite program to do activities and also to get to know each other. I think this has benefited me in a good way by giving me more patience and teaching me just to go with the flow.
Thank you, Ethan and Emma. And finally, just a cool activity we did this year. Many thanks to our great art teacher, Christina Slezak. Hayes Elementary did one more recently. So Art for the Sky, just a fun activity, high interest. So Emma, Ethan, Shayna, and myself, and Miss Boca were in there somewhere. So you're in the back? Okay. Oh, black. Yes, I'm in black too.
I'm in too.
Miss Bradford was there too. Yes, right. Special visitor from Miss Bradford. So we
Crouch down.
we thank you very much for this opportunity to come to speak to you this evening, and hopefully have a better idea of some of the things that are going on at our school. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Next up is Mr. Coates, who will talk about the MACAT program at Frost along with some students.
Thank you,
Do
Miss.
need any audio
Nope,
visuals?
we're good. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. My name is Doug Coates. I'm the MACAT facilitator for the school district. Here with me tonight to represent the MACAT program is Mr. Tony Abate, who's the principal at Frost. We have several MACAT students here. This is Eric, Melissa, Samantha, and Leah. And then we also have a couple of teachers. Ms. Colleen Birmingham is MACAT geometry teacher, and Ms. Angela Allen, who teaches in MACAT science. The MACAT program has been in place in Livonia Public Schools for a long time. It's 1977 is when it was founded. So the Livonia School Board has long recognized that academically talented students tend to think and learn differently than the general population of students. And in addition to their academic needs, as Mr. Zazinski said, they often have different types of social and emotional needs than the general ed population. They tend to look at the world from a different perspective, and we appreciate the fact that we have a program to support those students. Typically, when people think of academically talented students, they're usually thinking about one of two things. They're thinking about either a student who is spending lots of time reading and doing homework and they don't do anything else, or B, they're thinking of a student who does no studying and somehow gets A's on everything. And typically we find that neither one of those pictures is accurate, and certainly neither one of those pictures is complete for a student. MACAT students are typically very interested in a lot of learning. They're interested in a lot of academic types of things, but they have a lot of other interests as well. From dance to photography to sports to music to technology and everything in between. And so one hallmark of academically talented students and the way they think differently is they typically have a very high interest in kind of adult conversations. They like to have conversations with adults instead of just kids their own age. And at the same time, they often have a sense of humor that is really different than a typical middle school student. And so just the whole variety of the trying to support the whole person in learning is what the MACAT program tries to do, similar in many ways to what ACAT tries to do. One of the example of the interest that MACAT students have that maybe other typical middle school students wouldn't have is this Thursday they're going on a field trip to an environmental compliance center, which is basically how to take stuff in from the world around them and make it safe to dispose of. And I believe it's like 103 out of the 120 students are going. And it's a place where they do a lot of science that's very real, but also very practical. And so, again, I don't know if you would take that to a typical 7th and 8th grade class and go, hey, let's go to basically a waste management facility. But yet they're very interested in going. So anyways, the MACAT program has very much supported a program where these kids can be themselves, where they don't have to be embarrassed about what they like or who they are. And of course, we all need that. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to just tell you a little bit about the MACAT program. Let me just wrap up my portion of the program by telling you a little bit about the specifics of it. MACAT program is housed at Frost. There's approximately 60 7th graders and 60 8th graders in the program, but there is not a predetermined number, so that number goes up and down a little bit from year to year. Students from all three triads in the school district attend the program, and they become Frost students when they enroll in MACAT. The MACAT classes are taught by a team of 5 teachers, and all the MACAT students also have the same counselor at Frost, so it becomes a team of 6 adults that are working with the students on a day-to-day basis. The MACAT students take math, science, social studies, and English language arts with their MACAT peers, and then they take 2 elective classes throughout the day with the rest of the students at Frost. So there's a chance to get to know all students at Frost, just like there is at any other school. Similar to ACAT, MACAT operates sort of in a 2-year loop curriculum, except for math. Math is 7th and 8th grade separate, but the other classes are a 2-year curriculum. So it's 7th and 8th grade students learning the same material at the same time, and then the second year they reverse it, and then they do the same thing with the other loop of 2. And so having 7th and 8th grade students in the same classes allows greater community among the students. It becomes a place where stronger friendships can be made with kids above your grade and below your grade. And it also allows teachers in most cases to have students for 2 years in a row, which again, as Mr. Szynski said, it allows a really sense of comfort, particularly in that second year when students are coming back to the same teachers that they had in the previous year. Just like all of the gifted and talented programs in Livonia, we're seeking to support the individual student and develop the community of learners. MACAT is not a continuation of ACAT, although obviously we have a lot of students from Webster that come into MACAT. Students from all of the sixth grade schools in Livonia have the opportunity to apply for the program. We look at an essay that they write, their sixth grade assessments, as well as their teacher recommendation. And after eighth grade, students from MACAT go to all of our high schools. They sometimes go to MSC, sometimes they go to Kappa, sometimes they go to the IB program at Franklin, sometimes they go to Global Ed at Stevenson, and sometimes they don't do any of those. They just go wherever their individual interests lie. MACAT fulfills a need for our gifted students who like to be challenged and who may be bored in a typical classroom. MACAT helps keep these young minds challenged and engaged in school. And we appreciate your support and continuation of the program. I'd like to now introduce Mr. Abate, who will introduce the students to you.
Thank you, Mr. Coates. You covered that very well. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come tonight. We are very proud of the programs we have in our building, and we like to take opportunities to talk about them, so thanks. I'll keep my comments brief because there are no better spokespeople for any school program than the students who are actually in them, but I want to share just a couple of things about what I really appreciate about this group. Specifically, they are leaders in our building. They are go-getters. They are phenomenal collaborators. In fact, I called a meeting with them today to make sure that everybody was on the same page for how things were going to go tonight. They came in and sat down on the conference table and pretty much told me what was going to happen, which was outstanding. I appreciated that very much. The other thing that I really appreciate about what they're able to do in the building, and this is true, I think, of all of our programs, they have the opportunity to be part of a really close-knit cohort and form relationships within that, and have that safety and security to do that. But they're also very much a part of the larger school community, and we think that's really a core strength of our building. That no matter where you are, whatever program you are in or identify with, whether it's Center, whether it's MACAT, music program, etc. Everybody's a Frost Falcon and is welcome and has an opportunity to contribute, and these guys do a great job with that. So, that's all I have, and I'm going to introduce Samantha Sullivan to kick us off.
Hello, my name is Samantha Sullivan. I'm currently a 7th grader in the MACAT program at Frost Middle School. And unlike my other classmates I'm here with today, I'm new to LPS and I didn't actually go to Webster. So while I didn't know anybody but my twin sister when entering the MACAT program, my classmates welcomed me with open arms. The decision to join MACAT was amazing for me. It allowed me to already earn a high school credit, and I had the chance to take the ACT, which I did do, and I thought that was an amazing experience because I'm going to have to do it later in life, so why not early? And I also have the chance to take the SAT later, and I feel like the accelerated curriculum allows me more time to be creative. Because so in language arts, we get to do random projects, like make comics in language arts. And this all has really set me up for high school and college and beyond that, which I think is going to help make me more successful in life.
Hi, I'm Leah Habrick. I am an 8th grader in the MACAT program. Mainly, I think, as she said, some of the most important things about MACAT is the curriculum itself and the fact that it is an accelerated program. And as an accelerated student, I really appreciate that the curriculum is much more thought-provoking, I feel, than a normal classroom would be. I do take Spanish, which is outside of MACAT, and you can definitely tell that the environment is different in a class that isn't MACAT and a class that is. I feel like the teacher had to hold our hands more and guide us to the answers, where in MACAT, the teachers really let us figure things out on our own and come to conclusions with logical reasoning. Instead of just giving us the answers, they give us the tools to find the answers ourselves. I think it's much better to have the lessons and think about them more and really appreciate them and take them home with us. so that we can really absorb them and use them instead of just, having the information and then losing the information. So I think that's what makes MACAT really special.
Hi, I'm Melissa Barba, and I'm currently in 8th grade. To add to what Leah said, I feel like there's a bigger variety of classes in the MACAT program. And in classes like science and ELA, we kind of do a more overall approach rather than just focusing on one subject throughout the year. I also feel like MACAT prepares you for public speaking events and presentations better. It also makes you a better leader and more confident. I am also really close to a lot of my peers because I have so many classes with them. And we all kind of end up being friends and like a big happy family, and it's really fun.
All right, so my name is Eric Nielsen. I'm in 8th grade. And so MACAT is one of those programs that you enter and you're thinking, wow, can I keep up with this workload on top of sports, clubs, or all the other things that I'm doing outside of school? Well, the answer is anyone really can if you're motivated to do so. The teachers are always willing to help you out. And really just the community of students really forms like a unique and special experience for you in the program. Now the time is approaching for me to leave the MACAT program, and I know that it has prepared me for anything that is going to come my way in high school, including the MSc program, which I will be attending in the fall. It has helped me to manage my time better and build strong friendships. And I know after these past 2 years that going into MACAT was the right choice, and I can't really imagine myself without it.
I shouldn't say anything. That's phenomenal. I'll just thank you all for your support. We at Frost feel your support constantly and unwaveringly, and we want to thank you. And excellent. Well, they're great, right? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Tony. That was, and the students, that was wonderful. Any comments from the board? Mrs. Burton?
As I've said for years and years, one of the things that I love so much about Livonia Public Schools is we're large enough to have a lot of opportunities for a lot of different students and each one's unique needs, and that's inside and outside of the classroom. But our ACAT and MACAT programs are unique, and you don't really realize until you get out of the district how unique they are. I just kind of assumed that most large districts had similar programs, and it's not necessarily the case. But while these programs they're fabulous for some students, they wouldn't meet the needs of other students, but other programs that we offer are. But again, this is just one of the very unique offerings of Livonia Public Schools, and I'm so thrilled that we're able to offer it for these students and that they're able to benefit from it so much. And you folks did a phenomenal job. Way to go, students. So it's really exciting to hear from the students.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. Other questions or comments? Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. Obviously, ACAT and MACAT are wonderful programs. I'm personally very fond of them, having had kids go through them myself. But I have to say, today you guys have really knocked it out of the park. You are so poised and so confident, and our friends from Webster as well. Wow. We will watch your academic careers with great interest. I expect to see good things.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Other questions or comments? Looks like Mrs. Oquist may have something to add.
Thank you. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate Mr. Zazinski and Mr. Coates sharing not only your insights with us about the program, but we absolutely love the opportunity to hear directly from our students. It is always a highlight, and Mr. Abate, you absolutely were right. They hit it out of the park, and that is always a highlight for us when we share a point of pride about Livonia Public Schools, is when we get to hear directly from you. So we thank you for being here tonight. We thank you for giving us a glimpse into what makes your days so exciting and so engaging. I'd like to thank our staff who are here tonight. I know you have great pride in the program, and thank you to all of the parents who came out this evening, I'm sure with a list of many, many things you could be doing. So we appreciate you being here, and most of all for sharing your children with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. Let's give me Ian, if I didn't say it before, we're going to take a short break after item 3C just to congratulate our students and other recipients tonight. So now we'll move on to item 3B, donations to the Franklin Food Pantry. And may I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the generous donations to the Food Pantry program at Franklin High School from the following businesses and organizations for the 2018-2019 school year. Livonia AM Rotary, $12,000. Livonia Community Foundation, $3,000. Masco Corporation, $20,000. Miles City Church, $1,140 to date. 3M, $7,500.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Bradford and Mrs. Jenkins.
Thank you, President Johnson. Tonight it is my pleasure to bring to the board for formal acceptance a list of monetary donations that have been made during this school year for the Franklin Food Pantry. As read in the motion, this special program has received such generous support from the following businesses and organizations: Livonia AM Rotary, the Livonia Community Foundation, Masco, 3M, and Miles City Church. Before we recognize each entity, I'd like to invite Mrs. Beth Santer to join me at the podium. Mrs. Santer runs the program as a Student Services Coordinator, and I know that she loves talking about this particular program.
Thank you, Stacy. Superintendent Oquest, members of the Cabinet, the Board, and our donors that are with us tonight. Before I begin, I wanted to point out that many of the donors that are here have consistently given to our pantry since it moved from Emerson to Franklin 4 years ago. And some of our donors have been with us even the few years that it was at Emerson. So we've been very fortunate to have consistent donors that have loved our program. It's always a pleasure to talk about the food pantry and how it makes such a positive difference for our families and students. Currently, we're serving 80 families, covering all of LPS, and have the capacity to serve up to 150 families. Each of our families receive a monthly food box. And with our donations, we've been able to expand the amount of product we can give each family and expand the number of families we serve. Besides food products, our donors have been very generous in donating non-perishable products such as toothpaste, toilet paper, dish soap, laundry detergent, and many other items. These products are an important supplement to our monthly boxes. Our families in need those products as well. Currently, we have 2 elective classes that our students with cognitive impairments can take to learn authentic work skills, such as checking in food deliveries, unpacking, shelving, reading expiration dates, using picture templates, packing boxes, greeting our families, and loading food. These skills are essential as they progress through our program and move on to post-secondary experiences, including employment. Whenever we receive a donation, saying thank you couldn't possibly capture the amount of gratitude that we feel. We know that donating to our program is a choice, and we know that giving is not just about making a donation, it's about making a difference. We thank all our donors for choosing to make a difference in our program, in our community, and for all our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Santer. As we accept these donations with much gratitude, we're also pleased that a representative from each entity or organization has joined us this evening. We've prepared a special certificate of appreciation. And the certificate reads, Livonia Public Schools, Certificate of Appreciation, Livonia AM Rotary. Well, this one's for Livonia AM Rotary, heads up Tammy, for its financial contributions to Livonia Public Schools Food Pantry Program at Franklin High School, dated April 29th, 2019, and signed by Mrs. Santer as Program Coordinator. So the first certificate, we are glad to have a member of our school board, Board Secretary Tammy Bonifield, who is here to represent not only herself as a board member, but also a member of Livonia AM Rotary. Thank you very much. And next up, we have, where am I in my notes? We have Livonia Community Foundation Board Member Greg Capola on hand. Did I pronounce that correctly? All right. And from Masco Corporation, we welcome Sue Sabo. And Sue is the Sabo is the Director of Communications and Corporate Giving for Masco. Make sure we have the correct one. Thank you. Thanks for being here. And from 3M, we welcome Ed Geese, who is Automotive Business Development Manager at 3M. And lastly, I'm not certain if our Miles City Church representative, Ann, is with us, if she snuck in. Oh, she made it! Come on up, Ann. And there you are. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Okay, join me once again in offering a round of appreciative thanks to these wonderful supporters, because of their support, we can continue to support families in our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. And we have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by, let me ask, are there any questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. I was wondering if members of our community were interested in contributing, how would they go about doing that?
That is a question we received quite often. Would we want to say your phone number over the air?
Well, I usually get my cell phone, so no. Actually, if they're interested in donating, if they want to email me, that would be great. And my real name is Elizabeth, so it's esanter@livoniapublicschools.org.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Frank.
Beth, and as well, if somebody needed assistance, the same email, if somebody needed assistance and wanted some of the items from the food pantry, would they email you as well?
They can absolutely do that, but the way we have it set up, we actually have a Google Doc that's been shared with all of our schools. And all of the support staff and principals and psychologists, social workers, ESAPs, those kind of roles, they all have access to the Google Doc. And actually, if they see a family that's in need, they can add that family, and then we start serving them.
So start at their local school if a family needs it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Mr. Centers.
Just a thank you to our donors and everyone who assists with the program. We as educators really know that if students' basic needs aren't being met, they can't learn, they can't grow. So making sure that people are fed, they have water, the resources they need is so important. And having something in your stomach every day is so important. So thank you to everyone who's contributing, and makes a huge difference. I know our educators, teachers have shared that with me and all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Other questions? Mrs. Burton. Yes, Mrs. Burton.
So often we think of helping those who are in need, and you think you're going overseas, you're sending money out of state, you're going a great distance away, but there's need all around us. And I commend the organizations that have chosen to support both, but certainly tonight we're focusing on those that are supporting the needs that are in our own backyard, which I think is frequently overlooked. So thank you so much for reaching out and contributing to those who are literally our own friends and neighbors who are in need. And usually, if it is our friends and neighbors, it's they're quiet about it. But we have orchestrated a way here that keeps folks not feeling uncomfortable. They can very quietly go to their school, let that need be known. And through your donations tonight, we may be serving others who are in this very room with us and are not even aware of it. But thank you so much for reaching out first to our own community. And then, as I know with your organizations, you go beyond our own walls, our own borders. But thank you very much for literally taking care of our own friends and neighbors in this way. It's very admirable. And we thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Did you have something, Mrs. Oquist?
I did. Thank you, President Johnson. Just another thank you to our 5 corporate donors who are here this evening, representing donations of over $43,000 this year to the Franklin Food Pantry. That is significant, and will help us to continue the great work. I also want to recognize what Mrs. Santer shared with us, which is what an important opportunity it is for our students who are part of this program. And so not only the families who are assisted, but our Franklin Transition Program students who participate in the inventory of these materials, who help pack the boxes, who with great cheer and pride carry these out to the cars. And it is a really important opportunity for our students to have that experience at their high school, and to also be able to prepare with those job skills for the future. So many thanks to you and your whole team, Mrs. Santer, for the work you do with our awesome students.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Center, supported by Mrs. Bradford, to accept the donations to the Franklin Food Pantry. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Johnson?
Thankfully, yes. The motion carries. Thank you. Thank you again to all the contributors. We appreciate it. That'll take us to item 3C, a district update from our superintendent. So I'll turn it over to Mrs. Oquist.
Thanks, President Johnson. I do have just a few updates for our community this evening. You might recall that last month I shared highlights from our Stevenson students who attended the DECA State Conference. We have some highlights from Churchill and Franklin as well. So Churchill students Rishi Shadran, Shane Patel, and Akshaka Patanik made it to the International Career Development Conference taking place in Orlando, Florida. So congratulations to all of them. Matthew Gagia and Whitney Rubin were overall state finalists, and Franklin student Eric Santo was an overall state finalist, and Kelly Payton had a high role play score. So we congratulate all of our students who were part of the DECA State and International Conference. Last week, I know many of you are aware that we were proud to welcome our governor, Governor Whitmer, to Livonia last Thursday for her town hall event at Stevenson High School. We had over, I think, 350 community members in attendance, including many of our high school students, which we thought was wonderful to have them involved and engaged in the process. We'd like to thank everyone who took part in that last Thursday, and thank Stevenson for hosting us and the governor for joining us in our city. Last week, we held a documentary and a panel discussion entitled Screenagers. I don't know if anyone in the audience was able to be in attendance, but the documentary really focused on the amount of screen time that our young people are taken with nowadays. And it really gave an eye-opening look at the amount of screen time when you combine computer, cell phones, iPads, video games, and the impact that and social media has on our youth. That was followed by a panel discussion with a number of our staff members, and that was coordinated by our high school and middle school student assistance providers. So that was the second parent evening that we held this year at the request of parents on a topic that was important to them. So we'd like to thank everyone who attended and who put that on for us. Mr. Zazinski shared a picture of Art in the Sky at Webster earlier this evening. We had a chance to visit Art in the Sky at Hayes last week. And so they were able to make, I believe, a sea turtle. Is that correct? Yes, it was a sea turtle. And this opportunity was brought about by a grant from the Livonia Education Foundation, written by Christine Lakatos, art teacher at both Webster and Hayes. And she coordinated this event, which you may or may not have noticed as you looked at the picture. But that picture was designed by the artist, but created by students at the school who were all part of that live art project. And she did the same over at Hayes and created a sea turtle that also included 100 pair of blue jeans that she went and bought at different Salvation Army stores and wet down, and they made just a beautiful live sculpture on the grounds at Hayes Elementary. If you have a chance, Mrs. Jenkins did a story for us last week, so that's on our district website and our Facebook page, so you can see some pictures of that taken by a drone, an overhead drone, and we had over 400 students participate in that live art event. So thank you to Mrs. Lakatos for all of her work in coordinating that. We have had the run in Hometown Life with regard to Prep Athletes of the Week. So I just want to give a shout out to Catherine Olshansky, softball player at Stevenson, Maddie Champagne, lacrosse player on Livonia United, and most recently Autumn Reed, who is also a softball player at Stevenson. The three of them have taken the Prep Athlete of the Week for the entire Hometown Life region. Congratulations to each of these amazing athletes for that recognition. Last Friday was an Arbor Day celebration, so the Livonia City Tree Commission chooses a school every year to host asks us to host an Arbor Day celebration. They also provide trees for planting. Randolph was the gracious host this year. We were proud to not only have the Tree Commission members here and the mayor, we also had Senator Polhanke and Representative Pahutsky, who also helped with the tree planting. So thank you to all of the Randolph Roadrunners who helped make that a wonderful event. We have a couple upcoming events you might want to mark on your calendar. We have Music Fest this Wednesday in the Churchill Triad for Churchill, Frost, Johnson, and Webster. So that will be held at Churchill. Are some of you going to be there? Because you lit up when I mentioned that. Look at that. So we want to come and see you. All right. So that's on Wednesday evening at Churchill at 7 o'clock. And if you can believe it, it is already time for things like Honors Night and Prom. This week we have our first high school Honors Night at Stevenson on Thursday and our first prom of the year at Franklin on Friday. So we know this is an exciting time for our families, especially families with seniors in high school. And so I want to thank the staff, the administration, and the parent volunteers who work tirelessly to put on these special events for our students. We have a lot of exciting things coming up, but we have a lot of important days of school left as well. So it's a great time of year. We thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist.
You're welcome.
And we're going to take a short break, and I'll just tell you, we'd love for everybody to stick around for the rest of the meeting, but don't feel it's a requirement and you're not going to get extra credit for it. So we'll be back in just a few minutes. Thank you. Good evening again. We are now back for our break and we'll continue with our agenda. That'll take us to item 3D, written communications. Are there any written communications for the board? No. Seeing none, that will take us to item 3E, audience communications. What I need to indicate is that the board, we always do this before audience communications, the board has three roles. One is to hire and evaluate our superintendent. Second is to set policy. And the third is to align our budget with our financial resources. If the items that are being discussed in audience communication align with any of those three items that are the board responsibility, then you'll get a response from the board if a response is required or requested. If it deals with anything else, then it will come from the administration. Also, we do have a policy, and you see it on the blue slips, that each participant gets 3 minutes. And if you heard me at the beginning of the meeting, I talked about respect. And I asked that you respect that 3-minute time limit. That allows everyone to have an equal opportunity to address the board. And I have my handy-dandy timer here next to me, and you'll hear a beep when you get to the 3 minutes, and I will ask you to wrap up your comments. That's not an invitation to continue on for another couple of minutes, but again, please respect the 3-minute time limit. So we will begin, and I have 5 blue slips, and if anyone else wants to fill one out, again, we have them outside. And the first is it Corinne Martinez? Yes. Good evening. Come on up to the podium.
Come on up.
Do I just start talking?
You can just start talking.
You do.
Go
You're
ahead.
on.
Okay. Good evening. My name's
Evening.
Corinne. I'm sorry. My name is Corinne Martinez. I'm here to represent my Livonia Girls High School team. We're currently not recognized by any of the schools, and we really would like to change that because we work really hard for our team. We've come a long way. We actually beat one of our main rivals, Northville, and we didn't even get recognized for it. The schools did not announce it. We're not even allowed to wear our jerseys at school, but football is allowed to. The current lacrosse team is allowed to. So we're just questioning why we can't do that, and I believe we really should be recognized because I never thought I'd get a chance to play in college, but I've recently committed to the University of Michigan Dearborn to play, and this team has opened up so many doors for me. And if we get more sponsorship and just more recognition, I feel like it could open a lot more doors for a lot of other girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne.
Very nice.
The next one is Janine Martinez, and I'll bet you're related. Good evening.
Good evening, and actually I'm the spokesperson as well for the girls' high school hockey team, Livonia United. So I don't know if I should speak now or if I was going to be speaking later in regards for the team. So, what we won't do for our kids. I am a mom of 3 daughters who have all play hockey. I have a daughter who graduated last year from Stevenson, who's currently playing NCAA D1 on a scholarship. My daughter who's a junior at Stevenson, and I have an 8th grader at Holmes. I try to be a good role model for them and for these young girls, because I think women are powerful and need to be heard. As I already said, I'm the head coach for LU, and I'm the manager, and I'm very proud of this team and to be part of this program. Thank you, Livonia Public School Board. 3 years ago, I was standing up here fighting for this battle and trying to implement a team. I want to give big thanks to Steve Archibald, who helped me, met with me over the summer to get it going. Dan Willenborg, who I don't see here, who's currently is working with me. Thank you. Who has been signing my eligibility form this past year. And I also like to thank my 3 coaches who are with me as well. Jeff LaPointe, whose daughter is on the team in Stevenson. Todd DeSantis, whose daughter is at Stevenson. And as well as Eric Mink, who is not a volunteer, a non-parent coach. And another non-parent coach is Rob Kucharski, who's a 7th grade teacher at Holmes. And also I want to thank these young ladies here from the 10 Unites for Livonia and their parents and other community members as well who are here to support girls hockey in Livonia, which I feel is a Livonia hockey city. The benefits of being on this team: you get to skate with your classmates. You get to play for your school and have that pride. We are here again to gain more support of some capacity like surrounding schools, for example, Northville, PCS, Plum Salem, Canton, and Walled Lake. What we would like? To gain club status. And I actually have a meeting this week with Dan, I appreciate, who's going to sit down with me and try to figure out how do we get there. I want to get an activity letter for these girls. I feel they deserve it. They worked hard. They deserve some type of recognition. I like to have the ability to use the school gym 1 or 2 days a week to do off ice, because unfortunately it's a winter sport, so I can't go outside. I got to do it inside a gym. I like to have the ability to have a table up at open houses, curriculum night, freshman orientation, to do a little bit of recruiting and let it get out there, let other girls know we exist. Because unfortunately, I just got to rely on word of mouth right now. So updates and information on the team. We're working with LHA and LCN getting home ice twice a week at Eddie Edgar. A lot of people don't understand MHSA does not recognize girls high school hockey. The requirement is you have to have 75 teams. And currently at all levels of girls hockey, if you add up all those numbers together, don't even come close. So unfortunately, that's a gap there, and I don't foresee it coming close anytime soon. We are not here asking for any financial help from the district, nor coaches or managers. Team is growing. First season we had 10 players. This past season we had 15 players. Our first season we were in 15th place. The second season, this past season, we came in 7th place. So the team is improving. The coaching staff was made up of volunteers, including a current LPS teacher and a former LPS teacher. Hockey could help girls in the district if they get their letters and play for their school. may prevent Livonia residents from going to Mercy or Sacred Heart, which is former Ladywood students who have girls hockey's team. LU program is on the rise. This season, like Corinne had mentioned, we are doing successfully. Mercy, the 2018 runner-up, Cranbrook, 8-0, and also played this season champion Mercy closer than any team ever did. I do my best to treat this team as a varsity sport. We belong to a league. I give these girls a banquet at the end of the year, giving them awards and recognition that I think they deserve.
Ms. Martinez, you're
I'm up.
well over.
I'm sorry, apologize. I just want to my final statement is, the girls' high school team belongs to what's called a Michigan Metro Girls High School Hockey League. They're going to be adding Troy next year, Farmington United, and Downriver United. And just here, just so you guys understand the list of schools that are in this league in Michigan is Mercy, Grosse Pointe South, Grosse Pointe North, Brighton Howell Heartland, Plymouth Kent Salem, Ann Arbor Pioneer, Northville, Liggett, Cranbrook, Bloomfield Birmingham, Ann Arbor Skyron, Regina, Walled Lake, Sacred Heart Marion. Just so we can educate you on who's in the school district. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next slip I have is from Christina Slezak.
Come on, girls. Hi, I'm Christine Slezak. These are my friends. Come on over here. This is my daughter. She's 9. These girls are 7, 8, and 9 here. When I started playing, I play in a women's over 30 league, bar league. When I started playing, I was 12. At that time, there were not many girls' teams in the area, so I was playing with 19 and 20-year-olds. I was past the point, really, of development to play travel or AAA and play at the college level. They're just, where I was in that span, there weren't those opportunities available. Now you've got teams at U of M Dearborn. You've got club teams at U of M, Michigan State, all over the East Coast. Nonetheless, I've enjoyed playing. I play in the Metro Skaters Women's League. We have over 30 teams, varying levels. The league is growing. The sport is very popular. It's on the TV. You've got development camps coming to local cities. Like I said, this girl here is 9. This is my baby. They play 10U, which is a hardship in and of itself because you've got 9-year-olds playing, 7, 8, and 9-year-olds playing 10U. But nonetheless, they're playing 9U. They're competitive. What place did you take in states?
Second.
Thank you. Livonia had 2 10U teams this year of all girls. So whereas I played with girls that were 6 and 7 years older than me, we've got teams that are coming up through the ranks, learning at the youngest levels that will be ready. They play teams from neighboring cities like Brighton, Farmington Hills, and Trenton. Those cities also have multiple teams at these levels that are coming up. So as we continue to progress, the teams are flourishing, the teams are growing. Someday, these girls are going to be in high school. And when they get there, they're going to want to play hockey. They want to play varsity. So let's do what Coach Janine needs to progress towards that, give them the opportunity. I heard somebody, I think it was Miss Bonifield, say, the city is large enough to have a lot of opportunities for a lot of different kids. And if it wasn't you, I'm sorry, I was in the but the city is large enough for that, and I think we need to keep up with this. So I encourage you to support what Coach Janine needs. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you. The next slip I have is Christine Motivo. Good evening.
Just as Hockey Down is synonymous with the city of Detroit, Hockey City is synonymous with the city of Livonia. So I think that's important that everyone take a focus on that. A lot of people have thrived and moved to the city of Livonia because of A, its recreation, B, its schools, and C, its opportunity for employment. School systems thrive on everything that a school system offers, just like you talked about the MCAT programs. Sports systems also make school systems thrive. And if a school system thrives, then a city thrives. As a parent, my daughter did not grow up playing hockey. She always wanted to play hockey. But there were challenges because it was a travel sport, and it takes a lot of time and dedication. So when the opportunity came for this team to come to fruition, thanks to Janine, it was an incredible opportunity for her. And with that, this sport has created a sense of fulfillment where she feels like she's contributing to the school. It's cultivated and increased her commitment to the identification with the school and to the school values. She feels like it's giving her, I feel like it's giving her more positive reactions in her behaviors and how she interacts with other teenagers, because she has to be responsible for something. She's participating with teammates, and she's learning to communicate better. It also promotes physical activity, which in today's society is very important that we make sure that we are promoting that physical activity for all kids. Participating in a sports program also allows young people an opportunity to improve on their problem-solving skills, which obviously can translate into better academic performance overall. What Janine also brought up is there's currently 21 teams in the league right now. Although we did place 7th this year, which was a drastic improvement, we placed 3rd overall in the rankings with all of our games. So I think that is a testament to the success of the program. And again, there's at least 1 team being added to the league next year, at least 2 more the following year. And why not allow Livonia to be at the forefront of this growth of girls hockey versus being at the back end of it where you have to follow somebody else? Why not lead by example instead of being a follower? Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming. And the last blue slip I have is Kimberly DeSantis. Good evening.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
This is my daughter, Rachel, who is a 9th grader at Stevenson. Now, I don't want to come up here and be redundant because I think everybody made some really, really great points. But I want to talk to you about a personal aspect of this. Rachel started out as a Timbit, which is the youngest of the youngest on skates over at Eddie Edgar. She started out in Livonia. She played house hockey for a while, and then she went to travel, and she bounced around to different travel teams. Wasn't sure what she was going to do for high school when she got to that level until Janine got this program running. Rachel actually turned down a Tier 1 team so that she could play with her high school team. There's a sense of community, a sense of belonging. It's girls in high school. They need to feel that they belong to something and get some aggressions out, and that's where hockey comes in. Some of her friends went on, some of her travel teammates went on to play for their high schools, and at their high schools, they have a lot of school support. There's banners. They have like the signage outside promoting their games. There's newspaper coverage that's submitted by the athletic director, and our girls can't even wear jerseys on game day. There's quite the discrepancy there. And we just would like some support to let our girls know that their team is valued and respected just as much as the other sports are. I mean, Janine had said about, having a varsity letter or a activity letter, or publicizing certain things like that. Little things like that would make a really, really big difference. The sport just keeps growing, as you see, from the young ones on up. And we just want to keep our girls in their hometown. We want to keep them here in Livonia and give them the option to stay here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, girls, for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Someone else?
Oh, we had one more?
Sure.
Step on up.
Come on up.
Yeah, come on up.
Okay, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Last name?
Featheringill.
Featheringill. Good evening.
Thank you, and thank you to the board for hearing us out. I think it's important for the board to understand some of the numbers that go along with the passion that the hockey parents bring to the game and their children each day. Livonia currently has over 100 girls registered with its organization. Over 75 of those girls are Livonia residents. Unfortunately, we don't track what schools they go to, so I don't know what percentage is LPS, but I venture a guess it's over 60 or 70% of that 75 girls are LPS students. Outside of Livonia, there are roughly 50 to 55 Livonia girls currently playing in Farmington, Farmington Hills, Mercy, outside organizations because they don't have an area to play here for their high school. So with those numbers and with the time that Janine's put in to bring those girls back, not giving them a pace to play is just unbelievable to us in the LHA. The other thing I'd like to put to rest too is there's rumors that the LSA does not support girls hockey. That could not be further from the truth. We fully support Janine. I can't remember how much ice we gave you last year, but a ton. We want her program to succeed. We don't have room for all of the girls at that age group in the LHA. There's not enough ice in Livonia to go around at that time of the night to get those girls to play. And quite honestly, not all the girls of that age want to play at that high of a competitive level anymore. There's not a recreational division for girls at that level. So if you're not uber competitive by the age of 16 or 17, there's not a lot of options anymore. Janine's program gives girls that still want to play hockey at that age an option to play hockey. So I urge you to please consider her request. She's not asking for any financial aid or anything other than to be recognized. And that seems like a small request in and of itself. So hopefully I gave you back some of her 3-minute overage.
Thank you. Agenda with.
Mark's agenda is behind the
Mr. President Johnson's agenda. Is it in there?
Yes.
I think it is.
Little technicality there.
Just a little technical.
Sure.
Mrs. Oquist.
Thank you. I know we don't normally respond, but I'd just like to, thank all of you for coming out this evening. I'd like to thank Mrs. Motivo, am I saying that correctly? Mrs. Martinez for joining me at our coffee last week. I'd like to thank all of the young ladies who are out here this evening for spending time with us, and I know Mr. Willenberg looks forward to meeting with you this week. So we appreciate all of the feedback from each of you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. We'll move on to item 3F, response to prior audience communication. I do not have any. Does any from the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, our consent agenda. And well, if you don't have to stay.
President Johnson. Oh, wait.
No.
Yes,
Yeah.
look at
You're
that.
welcome.
They've settled
It's
in
riveting,
nicely.
but,
The girls are
President
settled
Johnson.
in nicely.
Sorry.
You could stay for the rest of the meeting.
No extra credit.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's right, they've got homework. Goodbye.
Mark.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you,
Mark.
folks.
Gotta be
Thank
good.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, there's one.
Wow, that cleared it out.
That's all right. It's all right. No. I just wanted to say they were so well behaved. They sat here for a couple hours and they were really well.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, a water bottle. We got a water bottle.
Somebody's water bottle.
Purple cute water bottle from the front row.
From the Knights.
One of our little players.
From the.
They were very well behaved. Very nice kids.
They're adorable.
They did, and they were so
Okay.
patient.
And then there was one.
And
No,
they're
there
tough. Don't, you know,
Diane.
don't kid yourself. Those kids, they look cute, but they're tough.
All right.
All right.
Agenda.
We will, we're going on to item 4, consent
Speaking of
agenda.
Mrs. Owen is hanging in there.
I know.
I know.
She's still in the audience.
I'm being sent.
One friend back there. Hello, Ann.
You can move to the front, too.
I guess I lost control.
You've lost.
Yes, I think so.
Are you giving Ann extra credit, Mrs. Oquist?
Julie, no.
No, you can stay back there. You can.
All right.
All right, we are going to continue.
President Johnson, I have a motion for you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonifield.
All right.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the following consent agenda items as recommended by the superintendent. 5A, minutes of the regular meeting of March 25, 2019, and 5B, minutes of the special meeting of April 8th, 2019.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mr. Centers. Are there questions or comments regarding this motion?
Nope.
Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mr. Centers, to approve the consent agenda. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
President Johnson?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. That takes us down to item 6, business matters. And our first item here is approval to purchase flexible furniture for Coolidge, Rosedale, Cooper, Johnson, and Webster under the 2013 bond. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Jarvis.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of flexible furniture from Interior Environments in the amount of $145,822.51, and from Business Interiors by Staples in the amount of $28,035.83, for a total purchase of $173,858.34 for the following schools: Coolidge Elementary, Rosedale Elementary, Cooper Upper Elementary, Johnson Upper Elementary, and Webster Elementary.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Frank. And Mrs. Scott, I think you're going to help us with this?
I am. Thank you so much, President Johnson. As we've discussed previously, specifically at the April 15th Committee of the Whole, again, as was just stated, we have 5 elementary schools that we're bringing forward. 4 of the schools, including Coolidge, Rosedale, Cooper, and Johnson, consulted with Interior Environments, and Webster consulted with Business Interiors by Staples. Again, these funds are being utilized, are from the 2013 bond allocated specifically for student furniture. And again, they utilize the National Intergovernmental Purchasing Alliance discount program. We also want to thank the community for supporting the bond in 2013, which has impacted all of our schools, staff, and students. So it is highly recommended that the board approve this flexible furniture purchase for these 5 schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott.
Thank you.
Questions or comments from the board? Just a clarification for anyone who may be watching at home. When we say flexible furniture, we're not talking about furniture that bends.
No, they can rock a little bit sometimes, and they can move, and they can be utilized in different ways. So they can be used in one configuration, then they can be moved and used in another. So sometimes they're not the traditional chairs and desks that we think of when we think of classrooms, but that's what makes it unique and fun for the kids, as well as engaging for their learning.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Frank, for the approval to purchase flexible furniture at 5 of our schools. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. That takes us to item 6B, approval of roofing design and construction services firm. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Frank.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation of the owner's representative, Lant Moran Cressa, to award the contract for roofing design and construction at Emerson Middle School, Livonia Career Technical Center, and Rosedale Elementary School, Summer 2020 project, and Riley Upper Elementary and Randolph Elementary, Summer 2021 project, to Roofing Technology Associates, RTA, Livonia, Michigan, for a total cost of $190,640, and authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute the final contract.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. And Mr. Francis will be helping us with this. Good evening.
Good evening, President Johnson. Based upon the age and current conditions of the roofs and utilizing the roofing assessment report commissioned by the district, the above-mentioned roofing structures require replacement and are being recommended for the summers of 2020 and 2021. So the recommended company, Roofing Technology Associates, also known as RTA, will design the projects. They will assist the district during the bid process, and they will help oversee the replacement projects on behalf of the districts in each summer that work will be done. So what we have in front of us this evening is not the bids nor the construction of roofs. We're currently talking about only the design and oversight of the projects by RTA.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
You're welcome.
Questions, comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, to approve the roofing design and construction services firm. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Francis. That brings us to item 6C, approval to purchase appliances for secondary foods classrooms 2013 bond. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Bradford.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of new kitchen appliances from Ferguson Facilities Supply, HP Products Division, Belleville, Michigan, for a total cost of $36,388.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mr. Centers. And again, we'll hear from Mr. Francis.
Thank you. This proposed purchase is for kitchen appliances for the 6 secondary schools, the 3 middle schools, and the 3 high schools, as specifically noted on the quote that the board has received, which products would go to which buildings based upon their needs in consultation with both an inventory of what they currently have, the condition it's in, and discussions with the teacher or teachers for those classes. So we are proposing and recommending the purchase of the appliance via Ferguson Facility Supply HP Products Division for Emerson, Frost, Holmes Middle Schools, and Churchill, Franklin, Stevenson High Schools. And to clarify, the appliances will be replacing the current appliances on a pretty much one-for-one basis in the classrooms, and these are for the curriculum in the Family Consumer Sciences courses. Specifically, I'm generally calling it the foods or nutrition class.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Just as a side note, in case there was the question, any of the current items that will be removed will either be recycled or auctioned off, or even potentially, if it does have any possible life left, maybe repurposed in another portion of the building. But in general, they'll either be auctioned or recycled.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Questions or comments from the board? And just to clarify, these are bond dollars, not...
I apologize, and this is from 2013 bond fund. We're using the instructional equipment budget.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. So no questions or comments. We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mr. Centers, to approve the purchase of appliances for secondary foods classrooms 2013 bond. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes. The motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to item 7, personnel matters, and I will relieve Mr. Centers of a obligation. Item 7A is resignations, and this is for the board information. So we'll move on to item 7B, resolutions of appreciations for employees who are retiring. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Burton.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached resolutions of appreciation for the services rendered by Margaret Backus, Tammy Banter, Virginia Barker, Lois Bauman, Carrie Berry, Tammy Colling, Cynthia Gessler, Deborah Johnson, Nancy LaPrairie, Karen Liskowski, William Leitz, and Gail Nelson.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs.
Burton.
Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Bradford. There's too many B's.
We have a lot of them, yes.
And I think Mr. Archibald will help us with this.
Yes, I will. Thank you and good evening.
I need help right now.
I'll do my best, Mr. Johnson. Today, these 12 employees will be retiring with a combined 274.8 years of experience with Livonia Public Schools. I'd like to offer my sincerest congratulations and ask that the board adopt the attached resolutions of appreciation and recognition of their years of dedicated service to the students of Livonia Public Schools.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Questions or comments from the board?
Congratulations.
Amazing.
There are an awful lot of folks on this list who have spent the greater part, if not their entire professional career in our school district, and we thank you very, very much for for that kind of devotion to our students.
It's always tough to lose this much experience. It's that institutional knowledge that we all thrive on, and it's hard to lose these people, but congratulations to all of them, and good luck. We have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Bradford, to accept the resolutions of appreciations for employees who are retiring. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. That moves us to item 7C, sympathy resolution. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached sympathy resolution for the family of Laura Desolates.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mrs. Bradford. Any questions or comments? Would we like to?
Yes, Mr. Archibald would like to share the resolution.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, this is a sympathy resolution on behalf of Laura Desolates. Whereas the Board of Education was saddened to hear of the untimely death of Laura Desolates, and whereas she was employed by the Livonia Public Schools School District as a counselor at Holmes Middle School and Churchill High School beginning on August 22, 2002, and whereas she consistently demonstrated her outstanding dedication to students, parents, and staff, and whereas Laura Desolates will be profoundly missed by her students, colleagues, and the community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District offers its deepest sympathy to the family and friends of Laura Desolates.
Thank you, Mr. Who are you? Thanks, Steve. Any questions, comments from the board? Mrs. Frank?
I was at Holmes, and I just wanted to extend on behalf of the board our deepest sympathies to her family as well as to the community at Holmes. This has been a rough couple weeks for the staff and the community at Holmes, and so on behalf of the board, I just wanted to let them know that we support them, and I know that Dr. Terrell and your staff were there that Monday following, and I think that was really helpful. They said there was just so much support that they felt. So thank you for being there. Thank you for providing that support as it's an ongoing loss that they feel at the school. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Anyone else?
I just wanted to, again, take a moment and extend, on behalf of the entire district, our sympathy for Laura's family, and also to our colleagues at Holmes, Mr. Stromberg and Mrs. Dykstra, her counseling staff colleagues, and all of the members of the school community. Our hearts are with you, and we share this resolution in her honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. Always hard to lose an educator. All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mrs. Bradford, to accept the sympathy resolution. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
President Johnson.
Yes. Thank you. That motion carries. That takes us to item 7D, approval of collective bargaining agreement between the Livonia Public Schools School District and the Livonia Education Administrators Leads. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Frank?
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District enter into a 3-year agreement with the Livonia Educational Administrators, which agreement has been ratified by Leads members. Said contract is to commence July 1st, 2019 and expire June 30th, 2022.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Oquist, are you going to address that, or is Mr. Archibald?
Mr. Archibald is going to get us started, and then I will wrap us up.
Thank you.
Just 2 brief comments. We're absolutely delighted to bring the settlement agreement to the board tonight for approval, and I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Mrs. Owen, who's here this evening, as well as the members of both bargaining teams for their cooperation and work throughout this process. It was truly delightful and something that all parties should feel very proud of.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Mrs. Oquist.
Yes, I'd like to again thank Mrs. Owen, who's here this evening, and Mr. Etu, our other president of Leeds, who was here earlier, as well as the remainder of their team, as well as the board's representatives from our district administration. Everyone worked very cooperatively and in the best interest of both the leaders that serve our students in schools so well, as well as on behalf of the district. We are very, very pleased to bring this to you this evening. And at this time, upon the conclusion of the vote, we'd like to invite Mrs. Owen up to the podium.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. Any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Livonia Public Schools School District and the Livonia Education Administrators Leads. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, motion carries. Mrs. Owen, good evening.
At this time, if you'd like to come up and sign, thank you.
Yes.
It's a receiving line.
Yes, thank you.
You're looking lovely tonight.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann.
No problem.
Thank you for all your work on that.
Oh, very much.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thanks for sticking with it.
I know.
They didn't get the memo.
Thank you, Ann.
We've got time if you want to address them. No. Thank you for being here. All right, that'll move us now to item 8, hearing from board members. Item 8A is fortunately another sympathy resolution for the family of Sybil Collins Wilson, former Michigan PTA president. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Jarvis. You okay?
Move that, President Johnson,
Mr. Centers.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached sympathy resolution for the family of Sybil Collins Wilson.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Burton. Mrs. Oquist.
Thank you, President Johnson. Mrs. Bradford is going to read the sympathy resolution for us, but we'd like to share this resolution in honor of the Michigan PTA president, Sybil Collins Wilson, who recently passed and who was a great contributor to not only the Michigan PTA, to the students and staff that the PTA serves, but was also a regular, friendly, and familiar face at our Founders Day events each year. Mrs. Bradford, would you share the resolution with us?
Sure. Sympathy resolution, Sybil Collins Wilson. Whereas the Board of Education was saddened to hear of the untimely death of Michigan PTA President Sybil Collins Wilson, and whereas the Livonia Public Schools, the Livonia PTSA, and Sybil Collins Wilson work together in partnership for the education and benefit of our students. And whereas Sybil Collins Wilson, as a citizen, PTA member, Michigan PTA president, and a true advocate for children, consistently exhibited outstanding dedication to students and PTAs throughout Michigan. And whereas Sybil Collins Wilson will be remembered with great fondness and with a profound sense of gratitude for the immeasurable contributions she made on behalf of all children in the state of Michigan. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District offers its deepest sympathy to the family and friends of Sybil Collins Wilson.
Thank you, Mrs. Bradford.
You're welcome.
Any questions, comments from the board? Mrs. Burton?
Yes, in addition to being instrumental in the lives of so many of our PTA and PTSA organizations, Mrs. Wilson did all of this work on a volunteer basis, which is just incredible. Livonia has been known for having very, very active PTAs and PTSAs for decades, and she was a true leader in this regard. On top of that, I think I can speak on behalf of our board in extending our sympathies to our good friend Liz Jarvis, who is a dear friend of Sybil's.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. It comes from all of us, Liz. We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Burton, to accept the sympathy resolution on behalf of Sybil Collins Wilson. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to item 8B, approval of a resolution to support Governor Whitmer's budget proposal. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Bradford.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached resolution supporting Governor Whitmer's proposed 2019-2020 school aid budget, which puts the needs of students first and foremost by providing additional funding and resources to more adequately meet their needs.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Burton. Any questions or comments? Mrs. Burton?
Yes, I think it's very important, as we've had much discussion about funding in the state of Michigan, and we're thrilled that the direction appears to be turning, that we may be taking steps toward putting more appropriate funding into the classrooms for our students. But with this specific proposal, I think it's very important to note that while there are many, many pieces of this budget, this proposal is, or this resolution rather, is specifically supporting the education portion of this budget. There's much to be said, pros and cons of lots of parts of that budget. Specifically, this resolution is in support of the education components.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Other questions or comments? Mr. Centers?
So we've talked for years that people in Lansing don't hear our priorities and really don't understand the issues. And the School Finance Research Collaborative came together, business leaders, school leaders, to really examine this and put forward strong recommendations. I really credit the governor for taking these seriously, and part of her budget really implements a lot of these first steps, really important. So it could be really good for our schools, good for our kids, so I'm very excited to support this today.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Mrs. Bonnefield?
We had the great honor of hosting Governor Whitmer at Stevenson High School, and we listened to her speak at the town hall. I have to say, I know she's trying to shake things up a little bit, but she has a lot of really great things to say. So I urge everyone, in the face of some of the different options that we have in front of us, that you really learn and understand what her proposal is, why she's doing it, and how it's how she trying to eliminate the shell game between the different funds in the state of Michigan. So I encourage everyone to please take a look at what she has to say, and encourage your legislators to really get more on board with what she has to say and how she wants to fund our schools. And she's really, I think, like Mr. Centers says, understands a lot about what we need and where we need to go.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. Other questions or comments? Mrs.
No,
Oquist,
please.
go ahead.
I wanted to echo Mr. Center's comments. The governor's budget proposal specific to the school aid budget really does follow some of the main elements of the School Finance Research Collaborative Study. That group was a nonpartisan group of business leaders, community leaders, education leaders from across our state who came together to answer the question, what does it truly cost to educate a child in the state of Michigan? Every child, a child with special needs, a child with English language needs, a child who is economically disadvantaged. And the School Finance Research Collaborative did an extremely comprehensive study and had weighted elements to the school funding formula. And Governor Whitmer and her team took a look at those recommendations and included many important elements that would significantly aid our students directly in the classroom. And that was really one of the focus areas of this resolution, is to indicate that the elements of her budget not only dealt with the per pupil foundation allowance dollars, but also put additional dollars in for those categories that I've mentioned, as well as career technical education and additional funding for special education. So that was an important element I know that our board has discussed over the past few weeks as we took a look at this in the study session as well as the committee meeting. And so this resolution in support of the budget highlights those specific elements, specifically that those elements need to be present for any of the budget recommendations coming forward in order to look at truly meeting the needs of our learners across not only the state, but as well as right here within Livonia Public Schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. And that's what I was going to say is we spent quite a bit of time at our committee of the whole meeting making sure that this particular resolution said what we wanted it to say and support that portion of the budget that dealt with the school aid fund. So I want to thank my colleagues for all the work you put in wording this appropriately for our purposes, so thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, we have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Burton, to adopt the resolution to support Governor Whitmer's budget proposal. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to item 8C, second reading and adoption of board policy JCDB, student dress code. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Burton.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the Policy Committee and adopt board policy language per the attached document for board policy JCDB, student dress code.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Bradford. And Mr. Willenborg, good evening.
Yes, thank you, President Johnson. The dress code policy that we have reviewed over the last several meetings dates back to 1988, well over a generation ago. But it was well written, and what I offer now and what we've reviewed is not any major overhauls to the policy, but some slight modifications and refreshment of the language. You know, where charges the school administrations and the school community to find that sweet spot between a student's right of self-expression and a student's responsibility in a civic responsibility in a safe learning environment. So those policies are developed by the school with the help of parents and students, and they will be reviewed on a biannual basis. So I encourage your support of this policy.
Thank you, Mr. Willenborg. Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Burton.
I'd just like to thank Mr. Willenborg, in addition to the cabinet and board team. Some policies are very easy, and while there's, as you said, there's not a lot of change in this, it still is rather a delicate walk to make sure that this is phrased properly. And above all, that this is not, that the student's dress does allow them, as you said, the right of self-expression, but while they are not disruptive of the educational process and respectful of others around them. So thank you very much for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the only comment I have is, it's been so long since we started talking about this, I think styles have changed about 3 times. But I think the policy should cover it. Thank you, Mr. Wollenberg. We have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Bradford, to adopt Board Policy JCDB Student Dress Code. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, motion carries. That takes us to item 8D, hearing from board members. And we have been, again, accustomed to opening it up at the end of our meeting for questions or comments from the board, so I will open the floor. Mrs. Frank.
Superintendent Oquist, if somebody wanted to read the resolution that we approved for Governor Whitmer's budget proposal, that is posted online on our website, correct?
It is. It's part of our board book packet available under the board tab.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Other comments, questions? Wow, this is quiet.
Group tonight.
I just have one comment. Back in March, which was Reading Month, I had the pleasure of going to Hoover, and those kids sent me a card, just wonderful from the kids that I read to, a picture and just a thank you for coming in. They didn't have to do that. That's great. That's what our kids are all about. So thank you very much for doing that, our students at Hoover.
Very nice.
And if there are no other, is there any other business to become for the board tonight?
No.
Seeing none, then we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.